This presentation is about the role of listening and reading in picking up speaking fluency, what sources are used by the most fluent Iranian EFL speakers. In other words, in this study, we attempted to figure out what role did input play in enhancing oral fluency of those most fluent Iranian EFL speakers/learners. Well, it goes without saying that English is the most popular lingua franca in the whole world, and progressing in our professional and personal lives without a good command of this language is seriously hindered. And a good feature of successful communication in English is that it is fluent. Fluency, which is the attribute of native speakers' oral proficiency, refers to learners' ability to speak smoothly, freely, and without unnecessarily pausing. It also makes speech really comprehensive. But the problem is that due to its demanding nature, learners who've reached advanced levels can be counted on one hand. Underpinning this study is Krashen's theory of input. Krashen believed that massive exposure to input leads to language acquisition. And then the point here is that how does input theory relates to the development of oral fluency? Well, the thing is that input itself consists of lexical chunks, and that by being exposed to massive amounts of it, these prefabricated items would be unconsciously acquired, so that the next time a learner speaks, they unconsciously would utter and reproduce these chunks, and that the more proficient a speaker is, the more lexical chunks they will be able to utter, meaning that they're capable of producing more fluent speech. So drawing on the role of input in L2 acquisition and guided by Krashen's input theory, this study was motivated to respond to one research question. What listening and reading sources are used by the most fluent Iranian EFL speakers to reach fluency in speaking English? Where the literature in the field is replete with studies that have been able to indicate the role of input in developing oral proficiency. Because of time limitation, I'm not able to go through all of them. However, I would point to some of the studies here. For example, in the year 2009, Zhang conducted a study to understand if there's any relationship between input and speaking. So the author gathered 52 participants, assigned them into an experimental group and a control group, and had the experimental group exposed to authentic input for about 1 year. And then after analyzing the data, the author realized that by being imposed to input, the experimental group completely and significantly outperformed their peers in the control group in terms of the development of oral proficiency. And then the author also realized that by being exposed to authentic input, the learners were able to acquire native-like oral proficiency. Also, in a different study by Ghanati and Madani, the effects of being exposed to input on Iranian learners' oral fluency was studied. The input in this study was a specific type of input, so the authors only exposed their participants to news input. So in order to understand the effects of input, as a pretest, they had their participants read some news articles, and then they asked them to recite that. And then based on their recitation, they assigned these participants their proficiency levels. And then as an intervention, the participants had to go through a period of intervention for several weeks, and as the experiment, they were supposed to be exposed to TV and radio news. After the experiment was over, as a post-test, the authors asked the participants to read a news article, and then they have to recite it. And then the result indicated that being exposed to input, especially a specific type of input in this study, helped the participant develop and improve their oral fluency. This study is a qualitative research study, and we've used interview to collect data as the major source of data collection. So 17 participants, 17 very fluent English speakers were handpicked in this study using purposeful sampling, and our major criteria for selecting these participants were the fact that they They had to have very advanced English speaking fluency and no experience of living in a foreign country where English was spoken. The age range of this participant was also 19 to 55. The analytic scale used in this study was the common European framework of reference for languages, and by the aid of its speaking rubric scale, only those with advanced oral fluency were selected to partake in this study. It is also worth mentioning that prior to the main study, we also conducted a pilot study with only 3 participants. Data was gathered using in-depth, semi-structured interviews, and with participants' consent, all interviews were recorded. Interviews were later translated, back translated, and transcribed for further analysis. Interviews were carried out in Persian, which was learner's mother tongue, and lasted on average about 2 hours. So once data saturation was reached, we moved on with qualitative analysis of the gathered data, as a result of which major themes were emerged. These themes are explained in the following slides. So in this study, by analyzing data, we realized that input sources that help participants reach a significant and advanced level of oral fluency could be categorized into 2 major categories of listening and reading. And of course, listening sources were played much more important role in improving oral fluency compared to reading sources. This is of course based on participants' own data. And in either of these categories, we came up with main sources and supplementary sources, which, as the name suggests, main sources played a more important role in improving oral fluency, and only afterwards, participants resorted to supplementary sources. And the order by which these sources have appeared on this figure is also according to the importance that was attached to these sources by participants themselves. So under the category of listening sources, the main sources that was commonly referred to by almost all participants were the use of movies and TV series. So by being excessively imposed to the input provided by a movie and TV series, participants claimed that they were able to reach a very advanced level of oral fluency, followed by news programs, and some of examples according to participants were like VOA, BBC Network, and etc. And then shows. Some participants believe that by tuning into shows and receiving excessive amount of input in the form of either talk shows or TED Talks, they were able to improve their oral fluency. And then last but not least, animated movies, as some participants believe that watching excessive amount of animated movies help them improve their fluency. The supplementary sources are textbook and the audio files that accompany these textbooks, which are in the form of cassette players, CDs, and any other forms of files that are combined with the textbooks. Some participants also believe that songs help them to improve their oral speaking, and then some participants believe that Skyping native speakers help them improve their oral proficiency. As for the reading sources, we also have main sources and supplementary sources. The main sources were reading texts, which were a variety of texts, including short stories to novels, and also vocabulary books that help a student to learn new vocabulary and then use those vocabulary in their own in their speaking. And some participants believe that by improving their grammar using grammar books, they were also able to improve their oral speaking and also balance their oral speaking and their oral accuracy. And the supplementary sources of the reading category are magazines and newspapers. And some examples were, for example, Newsweek, Times Magazine, and Tehran Times, Iran Daily. And we've also brought you some of the direct quotations from the interview, which overall the interview helped us to come up with the themes of our study and our findings. I'm gonna go over some of these themes right now. For example, one of the participants regarding watching TV believed that talk shows are great for improving fluency, and I recommend them to anyone. Or, for example, as for other participants said that I have unconsciously picked up a lot of words, expressions, sentence patterns, etc. from a large number of movies and series that I have seen. And then, for example, another participant said that I listened to songs several times until I learned them by heart because their words, idioms, and expressions are highly effective in my speaking. And for example, elsewhere regarding reading, a participant mentioned that reading has a great impact on my fluency. So by conducting this study, we've been able to understand and also to point out to the integrative nature of language skills, and we realize that all the four skills of language, they're actually a whole and they function as a whole, because in this study participants were exposed to input in the form of reading and listening, and then by improving their reading and listening skill, they've been able to also improve their oral fluency as well. So this then again shows the integrative nature of four language skills. And then we realize that between input sources and between listening and reading sources, listening sources had a more important role in developing oral proficiency and specifically oral fluency of the learners. Another important things that we concluded in this study was the fact that if learners are exposed to authentic input for rather a long period of time, they will be able to acquire native-like oral proficiency as well. And also another takeaway for learners by being imposed to input for rather a long period of time was the fact that they were able to learn and be familiarized with the culture of the target language. Also, last but not least, improving grammar had a direct role in improving oral fluency. It also helped learners to balance their oral fluency and their oral accuracy. So in this qualitative study, by analyzing the sources that played an important role in improving oral fluency of those most fluent Iranian EFL speakers, we've been able to tap into the role of input in enhancing oral proficiency. And as we realized, listening sources, played a very important role in improving the participants' oral fluency. So we believe that the findings of this study are going to be a tremendous help for those students, those EFL learners who really want to take their oral fluency and oral proficiency in general to the next level. So this is the end of this presentation. If you have any questions and comments regarding this study, you can contact us via the email address that is right in front of you. We really appreciate you for listening to us and following our study. Thank you so much.